Further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
The gentleman of the 29th ask unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and it be approved as having been read. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Introduction to guests. The gentleman of the 51st, Douglas Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the delegates from Monongalia and Cabell, we have some guests in the gallery with us today. From Moms Demand Action, we also have WVU faculty, Marshall faculty and students, members from Our Children, Our Future, and Concord students and faculty. If they would please stand, and if the House would please make them feel welcome.
The gentleman of the 7th, Douglas Harshbarger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I am blessed to have a couple pages from Pleasants County Middle School with me, so if they can please stand when I announce their name. Zoe Davis and Addie Davis. And they're accompanied today by their mom, Heather Strait, which is also a Board of Education member and a doctor in Pleasants County, and with their grandparents, Ray and Stephanie Strait, which are in the North Gallery. I also have with us today Tyson Kimball, and his parents today are with us in the North Gallery, Robert and Jennifer Kimball. If the House give them a warm welcome. Thank you.
The gentleman of the 29th, Douglas Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of myself and the gentleman from the 28th Delegate Pack, we have a couple pages here today from Shady Spring Middle School. If they'll stand up when I call their name. Gracie Emmerich, Riley Radford, and Riley Urigo. We're pleased to have you here today, and the House will make them feel welcome.
The gentleman of the 44th, Douglas Hanna.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Somewhere in the gallery, I have 4 members with me from Webster County, WVEA, and AFT. If they would please stand, and if the House would make them feel welcome.
The gentleman of the 60th, Douglas Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my profound honor today to introduce some of Berkeley County's royalty. The Queens of Berkeley County's School Scholarship Pageant, Miss Sabrina Harrison, who is escorted by her parents, Anthony and Abby Harrison. Miss Jessica Broadwater, who is escorted by her grandmother, Diane Broadwater. Miss Ashley Weatherholtz, who is escorted by her mother, Jennifer Weatherholtz. And Miss Stormy Roach, who's escorted today by her parents, Jonathan and Brooke Roach. Please make them welcome. Mr. Speaker, if I may, it's also my great honor to introduce my princess, Miss Hadassah Wilson.
The gentleman of the 48th, Douglas Miley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of all of the delegates from the 48th District, we have our Assessor, Rocky Romano, with us. If he would stand and allow the House to make him feel welcome.
The lady from the 32nd, Douglas Staggers.
Mr. Speaker, I have 2 introductions today. From the great 32nd District, where all the women are strong and the men are good looking, and seated in the West Gallery so they can be closer to heaven, are their escorts. I have some pages. Abby Dillon, Skylar Jeffrey, Maggie Adkins, and Logan Cook. Stand up. House, give them a big old welcome. My second introduction is the grandmother of one of our pages and the commissioner of the West Virginia Division of Motor Vehicles and a former member of our House. She served with the clerk, Steve Harrison. Pat Reed, our former member. Stand up and give her a welcome.
The gentleman of the 17th, Douglas Lovejoy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Cabell delegation, we have several guests from Marshall University here today. If they would stand and then be recognized, Dr. Mary Beth Beller, Dr. Patricia Parker, Hillary Brewster, Stephen Young, Sabrina Thomas, Heather Barker, Maria O'Vale, and Marley Harbor. House, please make them feel welcome.
Are there further introductions? The gentleman from the 42nd, Doug Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have 2 pages here today from Greenbrier County Schools. If they'll stand when I call their names, Cecilia Mason from Eastern Greenbrier Middle School and her brother Dana Mason here from Greenbrier East. They're escorted today by their mother standing up in our West Gallery. Please welcome Jennifer Mason. Will the House please make them welcome?
Are there further introductions? If not, the lady from the 49th for an update on the calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The following bills have moved from the special calendar to the House calendar. Committee substitute for House Bill 2718 on third reading. On second reading, committee substitute for Senate Bill 408. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 518. Senate Bill 545. Committee substitute for House Bill 2079. Continuing on second reading, committee substitute for House Bill 2433. Committee substitute for House Bill 2441. Committee substitute for House Bill 2595. House Bill 2729. Committee substitute for House Bill 2843. Continuing on second reading, committee substitute for House Bill 2941. Committee substitute for House Bill 2951. House Bill 2953. Committee substitute for House Bill 2976. Additional bills moved to House calendar. Committee substitute for House Bill 3100. Committee substitute for House Bill 3103. Committee substitute for House Bill 3116. House Bill 3147. On first reading, committee substitute for House Bill 2179.
The next business in order is reports of standing committees. Before the clerk reads the first committee report, Chair recognizes the lady from the 49th for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all bills on reports of standing committees be taken up for immediate consideration and read a first time.
Lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that all bills reported on committee reports today be taken up for immediate consideration and read a first time. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Clerk will proceed to reports of standing committees.
Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2597, reports back committee substitute, therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass.
Report to be received. Clerk will read the bill the first time.
House Bill 2597, creating a hunting permit to safely accommodate visually impaired hunters.
Bill will be advanced.
Originating in the Committee on Finance is House Bill 3148, reported with recommendation that it do pass.
Report to be received. Clerk will read the bill the first time.
House Bill 3148, supplementing and amending the Treasury and State Fund.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee on Finance has had under consideration House Bill 2882, reports back committee substitute, therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass.
Report to be received. Clerk will read the bill the first time.
House Bill 2882, creating a health professional student loan programs.
Bill will be advanced. Are there further reports of standing committees?
Originating in the Committee on Finances, House Bill 3149, relating to it's originating with the recommendation that it do pass.
Report to be received. Clerk will read the bill the first time.
House Bill 3149, relating to manufacturing and producing hard cider in West Virginia.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee on Finances had under consideration House Bill 2966, reported with recommendation that it do pass.
Report to be received. Clerk will read the bill the first time.
House Bill 2966, County Budget Flexibility Act.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee on Finances had under consideration House Bill 2967, reports back committee substitute, therefore, with recommendation that the committee substitute do pass.
Report to be received. Clerk will read the bill the first time.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2967, permitting a county to retain the excise taxes for the privilege of transferring title of real estate.
Bill will be advanced. Are there further reports of standing committees?
No.
If not, reports of select committees, messages from the executive, messages from the Senate.
The Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed without amendment committee substitute for House Bill 2612, proposing rules related to the completion or updating of source water protection plant.
Message will be received.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 11 relating to the retirement and pension benefits of certain PERS and teachers' retirement system members who serve in legislature.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
The Senate has concurred in the House amendments and passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 13 relating to distributions from state excess lottery fund.
Message will be received.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 86 requiring county boards provide free feminine hygiene products in grades 5 to 12.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Education, then the Committee on Finance.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 330 requiring contact information be listed on agencies' online directory and website.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 383 creating West Virginia Healthy Food Crop Block Grant Program.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 404 relating generally to sediment control during commercial timber harvesting operations.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 415 creating Timber Potency Modernization and Majority Protection Act and Unknown and Unlocatable Timber Interest Owners Act.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has concurred in the House amendments and passed Senate Bill 444, supplemental appropriation of DHHR divisions.
Message will be received.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 485, clarifying notification requirements for property insurance purposes.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 493, correcting terminology referring to racing vehicles illegally on street.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 529, clarifying provisions of Non-Intoxicating Beer Act.
Message will be received. Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the committee reference and take the bill up for immediate consideration and read a first time.
Lady from the 49th, action unanimous consent that committee reference for committee substitute for Senate Bill 529 be dispensed with, that the bill be taken up for immediate consideration and read a first time. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Clerk will read the bill the first time.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 529,
Bill
clarified provisions of Non-Intoxicating Beer Act.
Bill will be advanced.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 531, relating generally to workers' compensation claims.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 546, relating to health care provider taxes.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Health and Human
The
Resources.
Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 585, relating to criminal offenses of stalking and harassment generally.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 593, permitting critical access hospital become community outpatient medical center.
Message will be received. Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the committee reference and take the bill up for immediate consideration and read a first time.
The lady from the 49th asked unanimous consent that committee reference for Senate Bill 593 be dispensed with, that the bill be taken up for immediate consideration and read a first time. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Clerk will read the bill the first time.
Senate Bill 593, permitting critical access hospital become community outpatient medical center.
Bill will be advanced.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 624, allowing county boards of education use alternative assessment provided in Every Student Succeeds Act.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Education.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 641, relating to primary care support program.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 664, authorizing certain members of federal judiciary perform marriages.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary. Are there further messages from the Senate? If not, resolutions, petitions, motions. The gentleman from the 27th, Delegate Ellington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Rule 82, I move that House Bill 3127, dealing with Secondary School Athletic Commission and homeschool students, be discharged from the Education Committee and read a first time on the floor.
The gentleman from the 27th has moved that House Bill 3127 be discharged from committee, taken up for immediate consideration, and read a first time. Is there discussion on the gentleman's motion? The gentleman, as the maker of the motion, does the gentleman wish to open debate?
Thank you, sir. This is a bill that was allowing homeschool students to participate in local athletic or extracurricular activities in the public school system. There were stringent requirements for each of those students. This has been something we've been working on for the past several years. It went to the governor 2 years ago and was vetoed. The corrections on that were made over that time. Feel that it's something that could not get out of the Education Committee, but something that the body did vote on previously. I would like to see that passed.
The gentleman from the 35th, Doggett Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the education chair or vice chair yield?
The education chair does yield.
Thank you. Very simple questions. Was this bill on the agenda in education last week?
Yes, it was.
I'm not in education. I'm in judiciary, so we're very busy. What happened?
I mean, there were a number. We discussed the bill. At a point, it was laid over to the. Trying to remember. I think it was laid over to the next day. We continued discussion on it a little more, and then it was removed from the agenda.
Okay, that's all I want to know. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 1st, Doggett McGeehan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support the gentleman's motion. Homeschoolers pay taxes too.
The gentleman from the 55th, Doggett Spinagle.
Will the gentleman from the 27th yield for a question?
Gentleman does yield for a question.
Is this the bill known as the Tim Tebow bill?
That's been what it's been coined.
Okay, thank you.
The gentleman from the 67th, Doggett Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman's motion, while it technically comports with the rules of the House, in my opinion, seriously violates the spirit behind this particular rule. The purpose of the availability to discharge a bill is there in case a committee chair sits on a bill and refuses to put it on the agenda. There have been several times in this session when what's called the ENDA bill, the Employment and Housing Non-Discrimination Bill, has been subject to this motion and has been rejected. In that case, it's been sitting in the same committee literally for years. In this case, the Education Committee has seriously discussed and debated this bill and is still in the process of doing so. For that reason, I think it would be a corruption of the rules of the House to pass this motion. Thank you.
The gentleman of 36, Doggett Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to table the motion.
The gentleman from the 36, Doggett Robinson, moves that the motion by the gentleman from the 27th be laid upon the table. This is not a debatable question. Those in favor of the motion by the gentleman from the 36th a roll call has been demanded. Is demand sustained? The demand is sustained. The question before the House is, shall the motion by the gentleman from the 27th that House Bill 3127 be discharged from the Committee on Education be laid upon the table? Those in favor of the gentleman's from the 36th motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 44 ayes, 53 nays, 3 members absent not voting, less than majority present having voted in the affirmative. Chair declares the motion to table lost. The question is now back on the motion by the gentleman from the 27th. Are there other members who wish to speak to the motion? The gentleman from the 36th, Doggett Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman yield?
Chairman does yield.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, is this bill held up for some reason in the process here? I mean, can you tell me what the problem is?
Process has been just the Education Committee members.
So there's
It's been something that's been passed before in this body.
So it's something the current education members.
There were
are going
several
on?
that probably were not opposed, that were opposed to it and didn't want to see it.
So it can't pass the committee, so we're going to bypass the committee process to go out on the
Well,
floor?
it was laid over, I believe, or taken off the table, so I don't know if it would be passed or not. I don't know if they had a vote on it or not.
So the chairman decided to pull it off the agenda, and you disagree with that, chairman's?
True.
Is there something wrong with the legislative process with this bill, or
No, nothing wrong with the legislative process. That's what we're here for now. That's why it was discharged.
is there some distrust of the process that you're?
No distrust. It's sort of like the marijuana law a couple years ago, got discharged from committee.
Okay. Speak to the motion, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman may proceed.
I think we've seen this quite a bit. I think the bill has no support in the committee. The gentleman has no trust of the Education Committee, and therefore we should vote his motion down. Thank you.
The gentleman is 62nd, Doug Bibby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to speak in support of the chairman's motion. This is a good bill. It's about time we recognize homeschoolers and private school children in this state as equal citizens. They have a right to free education. That's what this bill does. It allows them to participate in extracurricular activities that are not available. So I would join with the chairman and support this motion wholeheartedly. It's good for West Virginia's parents and good for West Virginia overall. Thank you.
The gentleman at 37th, Doug Pushkin.
Mr. Speaker, point of inquiry.
Gentleman,
Has the bill been in the possession of the committee for more than 5 days? Yes?
Chair is informed by the clerk that the bill has been in possession of the committee for more than 5 days. Are there other members who wish to speak to the gentleman's motion? The gentleman from the 58th, Doug Coles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the gentleman's motion. There was a lot going on up in education this year, major education bills. If there was a good bill up there that didn't complete its action, I know it was taken up, I know it was debated. I don't think it ever came for an up or down vote. So if my friend from the 27th has a good bill that is hung up and didn't get full action in the committee, I will support his motion to bring it to the floor for further work. Thank you.
The gentleman at 23rd, Doug Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the chairman of education would yield, please. Has the Secondary Schools Activities Commission been consulted on this bill?
We did, yes, we did discuss it with them. They were present in the committee. Trying to remember if there were any questions asked of them or not. We did talk about it 2 days, but I don't remember whether or not they did come up to answer any questions or not.
You don't recall whether they answered questions in committee?
No, I don't recall. I know they were with us both days in the room, but I don't remember if they came up to answer any questions on this bill specifically or not.
Were they called to testify?
I mean, if they would have been, we would have brought them before the committee. I don't recall. I don't think they did. They were present, but no one in the committee asked them to come before us to testify to it.
Are you aware if the SSAC has taken a position on this bill?
I'm aware, I think, to a certain version of the bill previously they have been opposed, but I don't know of any specific position on this bill.
But they have been opposed to it?
Versions of the bill in the past, yes.
And the SSAC is the governing body for interscholastic activities, band athletics in the state of West Virginia?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 59th, Doug Kump.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speak on the bill.
Gentleman may proceed.
Good googly moogly. Here's the issue. People that don't participate with their children in public schools are being prohibited from using public school facilities even though they pay taxes for it. It's a no-brainer. Vote for the bill.
The gentleman at 37th, Doug Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to speak to the motion,
Gentleman may
not to
proceed.
the bill. And I believe the motion is to discharge from the Education Committee. Is that correct?
Gentleman is correct, but Chair would note that debatability of a motion to discharge from committee does reach the merits of the question under consideration.
Okay. While I may or may not support the bill, we had an interesting point from the Speaker Pro Tem earlier that the sponsor of the bill feels it's a good bill and it's been hung up in committee. We all could point to very good bills that are currently hung up in committee this close to crossover day. So to be consistent, I'm going to support the discharge motion, whether or not I support the bill, which I might not support the bill, but I'm going to support the motion to bring it to the floor. And I would hope that we all remain consistent, and when we feel that we have good bills that are hung up in committee, that we all support discharge motions to bring those to the floor for a debate. Thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the gentleman's motion before the chair recognizes the gentleman to close debate? If not, does the gentleman wish to close debate on the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I truly hope you will support this motion. We've talked about over with the education bill the past couple of weeks, it's all about the students. That's what everyone touts. It's all about the students. Well, this is where it's all about the students. Kids that have grown up in their community with their fellow kids that are in public school, that they'd like to participate with them at the same time. They may not be there for the educational part, for the didactic part, for one reason or another, but they want to be there to do things extracurricular. And again, the restrictions in that bill make it that they have to sustain certain academic levels for the previous 2 years. We're not talking about kids dropping out of school just to be homeschooled and get back on an athletic team. It's kids that have proven academically they've done it for 2 years. They have to stay in their own district. They're not being shopped around and recruited to the Greenbrier or other places, okay? So, but they also have to maintain the same code of ethics, the same discipline, and also have to get the immunizations that the regular students have to do. So I would truly hope you support this bill. Thank you.
The question before the House is a motion by the gentleman from the 27th that House Bill 3127 be discharged from committee, taken up for immediate consideration, and read a first time. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. No. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Clerk will read the bill the first time.
House Bill 3127.
For what purpose does the gentleman from the 37th seek recognition?
Thank you. Would this be appropriate time to make a motion?
Let the clerk finish the reading of the bill first time.
Relating to the Secondary School Activities Commission and participation by homeschooled students. Yeah.
Bill will be advanced. For what purpose did the gentleman from the 37th seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to take off the table the motion that was made by the gentleman from the 3rd to discharge the Employment and Housing Non-Discrimination Act from the Committee on Industry and Labor.
What's the bill number? Clerk.
Second. What is it? 2733? House Bill 2733.
The question for the House is the motion by the gentleman from the 37th that House Bill 2733 that the motion to discharge from committee be taken from the table. The question before the House is a non-debatable question. The question before the House is, shall the motion to discharge from committee be taken from the table? For what purpose does the gentleman from the 66 seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of inquiry.
Gentleman may proceed.
If it's the will of the body to have that motion remain on the table, we would vote red, correct?
The gentleman would vote no. That is correct.
Thank you.
No roll call has been demanded at this point, but the gentleman would vote no. The gentleman, the 50th, Doug Caputo.
Could the clerk read the title of the bill, please?
House Bill 2733, adding sexual orientation and gender identity to the categories covered by the Human Rights Act.
So, Mr. Speaker, point of order.
Gentleman, proceed.
If we want to proceed with this bill, we must remove it from the table. That would be a yes vote. Is that correct?
It would be, the gentleman would vote yes, correct.
Roll call, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Are there other members roll call has been demanded on the question of the gentleman's motion from the 37th? Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question for the House is, shall the motion to discharge House Bill 2733 from committee be taken from the table? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 37 ayes, 60 nays, 3 members absent, not voting. Less than a majority present having voted in the affirmative, chair declares the motion lost. Are there further motions? The gentleman first, Douglas McGinn.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to take from the table the motion to discharge to defend the Guard Act, House Bill 2732. And I request the yeas and nays.
The question for the House is the gentleman's motion that the motion to discharge House Bill 2732 be taken from the table. This is a non-debatable question. Those in favor of the gentleman's motion will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Roll call's been demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question for the House is the motion by the gentleman that the motion to discharge House Bill 2732 be taken from the table. This is a non-debatable question. For what purpose does the gentleman from the first seek recognition?
Point of inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman may
if we
proceed.
wish to move forward with a debatable discharge motion, it would be in the affirmative green, correct?
The gentleman is correct. The question for the House is the motion by the gentleman from the first that a motion to discharge House Bill 2732 be taken from the table. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 53 ayes, 44 nays, 3 members absent not voting. Majority having voted in the affirmative, chair declares the motion adopted. The question before the House is the motion that House Bill 2732 be discharged from committee. This is a debatable question. Is there discussion on the motion? The gentleman first, Douglas McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think you all heard my comments on Friday morning about this bill. This is an important policy, I think, that we need to pass out of this chamber, at least one chamber, to send a message to other state legislatures that we do have some sort of mechanism that we can force some sort of accountability on Washington, D.C., and some sort of effort to restore constitutionalism to the power of war. Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, which every member of this body has taken an oath to support and defend, gives the power of war strictly to the U.S. Congress. And I don't have to run through all the notable figures and authorities on the Constitution, the framers, the founders. Again, you've heard that all. This bill seeks to rectify this grave abrogation and deviation from constitutional law over the past 75 years, where the Congress has abdicated its duty to the executive, and we have gone to war on a whim continually by executive fiat sometimes, and we have cost many Americans their lives for unnecessary reasons. We have violated Thomas Aquinas' just war theory in practically every conflict since the Second World War, and we just basically disregard our oaths of office if we don't do something about this, because this is a policy that we can move forward that addresses the long-term fate of this republic. Every republic in the past was doomed from the get-go because they continually expanded their military so-called empires. Just study the ancients. That's all I'm asking you to do, is look at history. We need to learn from it. We need to do some sort of effort right now. Please support the discharge motion so we could put it on first reading and at least pass it out of this House. Thank you.
The gentleman, the 55th, Douglas Spinagle.
Inquiry of the chair.
Gentleman may proceed.
The gentleman's motion from the first is just the discharge from committee. That doesn't necessarily mean it would be read a first time. Is that correct?
Gentleman is correct. That would be a separate motion.
Would the gentleman from the first yield for a question?
Gentleman does yield.
Is your intent that this just be discharged or be discharged and read a first time?
Yeah, I would ask for that.
So you probably need to request and modify your motion.
Okay, I'll modify my motion. Let's have it read a first time after we win this discharge.
Is there objection to the gentleman's request of modification of the motion? Chair hears no objection. Are there other members who wish to speak to the motion before the House? If not, the question before the House is the motion that House Bill 2732 be discharged from committee and read a first time. A roll call has been demanded. Is demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question is on the motion that House Bill 2732 be discharged from committee and taken up for immediate consideration and read a first time. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 56 ayes, 41 nays, 3 members absent not voting. A majority haven't voted in the affirmative. Chair declares the motion adopted. Clerk will read the bill the first time.
House Bill 2732, Defend the Guard Act.
The bill will be advanced. Are there further motions? Bills introduced. Unfinished business. Bills on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 26, permitting certain employees of educational service cooperatives participate in state teachers' retirement systems.
The lady from the 38th, Dr. Graves, to explain the bill. The lady from the 38th, Dr. Graves, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the bill would amend the provisions of the West Virginia Code relating to participants in the state teachers' retirement system and in the teachers' defined contribution retirement system. The bill would authorize full-time employees of educational services cooperatives to be members of TERS and TDC. The definitions of the terms teacher member and non-teaching member in the TERS statutes, that's State Teachers Retirement System statutes, would be amended to include employees of educational services cooperatives who are performing services of an educational nature. The bill would also amend the definition of member or employee in the TDC statutes to include persons who are regularly employed for full-time service by any educational services cooperative. The provisions of this bill were contained in HB 4219, which did pass the House of Delegates and was not taken up in time by Senate. I would urge adoption.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are the members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? The gentleman 21st, Doug Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentlelady yield?
Lady does yield.
Are these educational service cooperatives what we used to call our RACES?
You are correct, sir.
So this is just allowing those people to continue paying into the retirement system they had been paying into for years before we eliminated those?
You are also correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, the question for the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 97 ayes, 0 nays, 3 members absent not voting. Majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 26.
For what purpose does the gentleman to the 16th, Dr. Hornbuckle, seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to address the House.
Chair would ask that we complete action on this bill before we process your request. Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. The gentleman to the 16th asked unanimous consent to address the House. Is there objection? Chair hears no objection. The gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to note that on Monday, February the 25th, we just now discharged bills on the Defense Guard and Tim Tebow. That's okay. But we did not want to debate civil rights for everybody. Understand what we just did. Consistency, as the gentleman from the 37th just spoke. Wherever you're at, that is okay. That is your right. We just talked about the Defense Guard and Tim Tebow, and civil rights came in last. I don't know what we're doing here, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Clerk will read the next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 489 relating to Pharmacy Audit Integrity Act.
The gentleman, the 64th, Docket Householder, to explain the bill. The gentleman from the 27th, Docket Ellington, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill regulates pharmacy benefit managers in West Virginia. The bill will require that pharmacy benefit managers be licensed with the Insurance Commission. The bill prohibits 2 current PBM practices which have caused significant reductions in pharmacy reimbursements. First, it prohibits a pharmacy benefit manager from paying 340B pharmacy a reimbursement rate that is lower than it pays other pharmacies for the same item. Second, it limits when the PBM may perform a chargeback involving a dispensed product. This will provide pharmacist reimbursement certainty when he or she dispenses a medication. Finally, it requires that PEIA provide quarterly reports to the governor and legislature on administrative fees, rebates, or processing charges of its PBM. This will allow the legislature and the governor to know how much the PBM is making off rebates and the spread to use in making future policy decisions. The language is based upon language Virginia recently adopted. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 98 ayes, 0 nays, 2 members absent not voting. A majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 489.
Are there amendments to the title?
Delegate Ellington moves to amend the title.
Question before the House is the adoption of the title amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. For what purpose does the gentleman from the 50th seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the remarks by the gentleman from the 16th be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Are there objections to the gentleman's request? Chair hears no objections. Clerk will read the next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate.
Okay, lady from the 49th for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that committee substitute for Senate Bill 489 be made effective from passage.
The lady from the 49th moves that committee substitute for Senate Bill 489 be made effective from passage. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 98 ayes, 0 nays, 2 members absent not voting, 2/3 of members elected having voted in the affirmative. Chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2229, adding violations of law upon which a public servant's retirement plan may be forfeited.
The gentleman at 27th, Delegate Schott, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All retirement plans under the laws of the state of West Virginia contemplate that service rendered by any public officer or employee shall always be honorable. Currently, the term less than honorable service is defined by the code as an impeachment conviction, a felony conviction, or conduct which constitutes an impeachable offense or felony but was immunized or plea bargained to a lesser offense. I'm sure most of you are now familiar with our Commission on Special Investigations, and we've learned during the course of those meetings that one of the most effective deterrents to criminal activity by public employees is the forfeiture of their retirement plan. What this bill does is redefine less than honorable service to include certain misdemeanors that are related directly to a public servant's office and committed by that public servant while holding the office or during employment. For example, grand or petty larceny, larceny of banknotes, checks, writings, embezzlement, false swearing, receiving a bribe, and so forth. Those are among the misdemeanor offenses that are directly related to the office and committed during the employment. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question for the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 98 ayes, 0 nays, 2 members absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2229.
Are there amendments to the title?
Delegate Schott moves to amend the title.
Question before the House is the adoption of the title amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2452, creating the West Virginia Cybersecurity Office.
The gentleman of 66, Delegate Espinoza, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2452 would enact a new article of code that creates the West Virginia Cybersecurity Office within the State Office of Technology. The state's Chief Technology Officer would appoint the Chief Information Security Officer to supervise the office. The office is to set standards for cybersecurity and is charged with managing the cybersecurity framework to assess and eliminate, reduce and recover from cyber threats to the state for all state agencies, excluding higher education institutions, the county boards of education, the state police, state constitutional officers, the legislature, and the judiciary. The affected agencies would be required to undergo a cyber risk assessment as directed by the Chief Information Security Officer, adhere to cybersecurity policies and standards, submit a cyber risk self-assessment report to the Chief Information Security Officer by December 31st, 2020, and manage a plan of action and milestones going forward. Information that could threaten the technology infrastructure critical to government operations and services, public safety or health would be exempt from the Freedom of Information Act. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage of the bill.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are the members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result of this question. There are 96 ayes, 2 nays, 2 members absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2452.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will bring to the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2550, creating a matching program for the Small Business Innovation and Research Program and the Small Business Technology Transfer Program.
The gentleman from the 35th, Doug Capito, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This bill provides matching funds for participants in 2 federal programs, the Small Business Innovation and Research Program and the Small Business Technology Transfer Program. Just to give a little background on how this works, the federal government has established these 2 programs on a federal level such that starting companies that are trying to get their feet underneath them are permitted to apply for loans from the federal government to receive seed funding. This can start on different phases. It has phase 1, 2, and 3 on the federal level, and it's different amounts for each phase. And at each one of those phases, as you can imagine, chronologically, it starts with planning, and then it goes to research and development, and so on and so forth. And the ultimate goal is to encourage research and development for the goal of optimal commercialization of a product. Here in West Virginia, we don't have a state matching program at present. But essentially all of our brothers and sister states that surround us and touch us do. And they're seeing great success with these programs, especially Kentucky. I can attest to that, having read and researched a lot on this subject. The state matching program will operate as follows. The matches will be $2,500 for phase 0 funding for successfully submitting an SBIR STTR. And when I use SBIR STTR, you can look in the title, and those are the acronyms that we use for to shorten the title of those mouthful of funds. So the second thing it does is $100,000 for phase 1 federal grant, which would be paid in 2 remittances. The original bill had those paid in a 50-50 match, but the committee substitute before you has an upfront 75% pay and a subsequent match of 25%. What? Excuse me, it's the other way around, 25%, then 75%. Pardon me, I've been informed by Cano. It's 50-50 at present. It was 75-25. And then the third match is $100,000 per year maximum for 2 years for phase 2 federal grant. And one for 5 years. Okay. And then each company can only receive one of these, 1 per every 5 years. I would add, and I hope this provides some good news to some of you sitting out there, is that this program has already been provided seed money. It does not come out of the general revenue budget. It has already been provided in a supplemental by the state auditor's office in the amount of $500,000, at which point the program will exist and fund to that amount, and then no more, at least for this year. That's the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge its passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result of this question. There are 98 ayes, 0 nays, 2 members absent not voting. A majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. Clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2550.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2598, relating to submitting a certified statement attesting to status as a charitable or public service organization.
The gentleman at 28th Delegate Pack to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before us is House Bill 2598. The purpose of this bill is to require a charitable or public service organization applying for state insurance coverage by the Board of Risk and Insurance Management to submit a certifying statement attesting to its status as a charitable or public service organization. That's the bill, Mr. Speaker. I urge its passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result of this question. There are 98 ayes, 0 nays, 2 members absent not voting. A majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2598.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2690, relating to guarantee associations.
The gentleman of 35th, Delegate Capito, to explain the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This bill amends West Virginia Code 33-26A-19 relating to policy holder notices under the West Virginia Life and Health Insurance Guarantee Association Act. This bill would increase consistency of our code with the National Association of Insurance Commissioners Life and Health Insurance Guarantee Association Model Act. The bill removes the requirement that the commissioner propose rules for legislative approval establishing the form and content of the disclaimer that advises a policy owner that the guarantee association does not cover the policy or contract, or if coverage is available, it would be limited and subject to continued residence in West Virginia. The content of the disclaimer is already set forth in code. Requiring rulemaking does not permit changes to be made in a timely manner to the disclosure. The bill also removes duplicative language. Mr. Speaker, it's a bill. Urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 98 ayes, 0 nays, 2 members absent not voting. A majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. Clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2690.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2694, relating to the state's ability to regulate hemp.
The gentleman from the 56th, Delegate Howell, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to regulate the production of hemp by developing a procedure of recording where the industrial hemp is grown, a procedure for testing the THC concentration in the hemp, a procedure for the disposal of products that exceed the growing guidelines, establishing penalties for growers that do not comply with the approved plan, and ensuring the state plan complies with federal code. I urge passage.
The question for the House is, shall the bill pass? Are the members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 96 ayes, 2 nays, 2 members absent not voting. A majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2694.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2770, Fairness and Cost Sharing Calculation Act.
The gentleman 27th, Delegate Schott, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2770 relates to calculations regarding deductibles in prescription drug health plans. It's intended to ensure that the value of copay assistance programs is applied towards a patient's deductible in their health insurance plan. Currently, many individuals have high deductible plans. Those can be a combined medical pharmacy deductible or an annual prescription deductible that is separate from the general annual deductible. Some pharmaceutical manufacturers offer copayment offset programs, also known as copay cards or coupons, and those help cover a beneficiary's out-of-pocket costs and or deductible for certain specialty drugs. Until recently, the payments made by a manufacturer via a copay card or other mechanism would count toward that patient's deductible and out-of-pocket maximum. Once the deductible is reached, the plan pays for all subsequent prescriptions. The bill would ensure that that process continues, but is needed because there are now certain plans or insurers that are adopting another approach, which is called a copay accumulator approach, that results in the manufacturer's payments no longer counting toward the deductible or out-of-pocket maximum. Essentially, the bill requires a health plan to accept the amount paid by a manufacturer or other third party to be applied to a person's deductible. You may recall that we had a handout on our desk some time ago from a number of organizations that recommend this type of approach and recommend this bill as well as the equivalent Senate bill. Those include the American Cancer Society, American Diabetes Association, the Arthritis Foundation, the National MS Society, West Virginia Academy of Family Physicians, and many others. It's a good bill, Mr. Speaker. I urge its passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are the members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result of this question. There are 98 ayes, 0 nays, 2 members absent not voting. A majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2770.
Are there amendments to the title?
Delegate Schott moves to amend the title.
The question before the House is the adoption of the title amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2816, removing the terms hearing impaired, hearing impairment, and deaf mute from the West Virginia Code and substituting terms.
The gentleman 28th, Delegate Pack, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is House Bill 2816. The purpose of this bill is to remove the terms hearing impaired and hearing impairment from West Virginia Code and to substitute those terms by adding deaf and hard of hearing, or hearing difficulties in all instances of the removed words. I urge passage, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are the members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result of this question. There are 98 ayes, 0 nays, 2 members absent not voting. A majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2816.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2827, removing the residency requirements for hiring deputy assessors.
The gentleman of 56, Delegate Howe, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Currently, deputy assessors, employees of the elected assessor, must reside in be registered to vote in the county they work for. The purpose of this bill is to remove those requirements. None of the employees for their other elected county offices have this requirement. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 98 ayes, 0 nays, 2 members absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2827.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2828, relating to qualified opportunity zones.
The gentleman of 13th, Douglas Higginbotham, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Newly enacted federal law provides tax incentives to investors in qualified opportunity zones. Under the federal law, a taxpayer may invest capital gains from a prior venture in an opportunity zone project. The taxpayer then can defer the tax on these gains. The governor of each state has already designated the opportunity zones in their respective states, and West Virginia has 55 qualified separate opportunity zones scattered throughout the state. And on each of your desks, there's actually a map showing where all 55 opportunity zones are in West Virginia. This bill will further incentivize these investments by exempting income derived from an opportunity zone business from state taxable income for a 10-year period. Businesses seeking to enjoy the benefit of this bill must qualify as a qualified opportunity zone business as stated under federal law. And accordingly, substantially all of the company's physical assets must be located in an opportunity zone. And further, this bill provides that a qualified business must be a newly formed and registered business having registered in the state after January 1st, 2019. That is the bill, Mr. Speaker. I encourage passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman, the 67th, Douglas Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Full disclosure, I was originally a sponsor of this bill until I got this information to which the gentleman referred. And incidentally, before I got this map, I had a list of the zones. If you will look at the map and look at Jefferson County, while there are, in fact, a few low-income pockets in there, for the most part, these are the most prosperous communities in the wealthiest county in the entire state of West Virginia. This, I think, calls into question the accuracy of the entire map. And I think until we get this right, we should beat this bill. It's a waste. Thank you.
The gentleman of 37th, Douglas Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from the 13th please yield?
The gentleman does yield.
Thank you. Do you know how it was determined where these zones would be?
Yes, they were actually based on census tracts, and the governor, in cooperation with the Department of Commerce, chose all 55 opportunity zones.
So it was the governor's office that made the final determination?
I believe so.
And
yes.
do you know when that was made?
At some point last year, I don't have a date.
It was last year? I think you're right. I remember I was following this because we had a couple of requests in Kanawha County as well. Thank you. At the appropriate time, I just wanted to mention something. Thank
Gentleman may proceed.
I'm just looking at this map also, and I share some of the concerns from the gentleman from the 67th, and I couldn't help but noticing that it says opportunity zones equal low-income communities, and Greenbrier County seems to have the lion's share of the opportunity zones, while McDowell County, which is has one of the lowest average incomes in the state, has none. So Greenbrier has a rather large opportunity zone. McDowell has 0.
The gentleman of 25th, Douglas Painter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill, while I had some issues with it initially, looking at it now, it looks a little bit better on the map, although I still have one county missing on it, which is not good because, as the gentleman from the 37th said, it is one of the poorest places in the state, but as I always say, some of the best people in the state. And overall, though, I'm going to support this bill and consider it a work in progress, and I think that we should all support this because every little bit helps in these areas. And don't, as our speaker says, do not let good be the enemy of perfect. Thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? The gentleman of 35th, Douglas Scaff.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the intent behind this bill is on point. I think one thing we need to realize is we can't go back and hold current legislators accountable for where these zones and how they were picked. A couple years ago, all counties were asked to submit areas that they might designate an opportunity zone. And come to my displeasure to find out that a lot of counties didn't even submit the paperwork. So before we criticize why or why not some of these areas, which I totally agree with some of these areas in the state should have opportunity zones, let's not be so quick to judge why or why not they don't have them, because we had someone testify in committee that said some of the counties didn't even submit the paperwork. So I think we go back in the future and see how we can correct that in those areas. Let's see how this works. There's a lot of good areas on here that will bring investment to areas of the state that need help. So I think we should support this bill. I think it's a step in the right direction. It's not perfect. We need more zones. I totally agree with my colleagues, but let's not hold current legislators accountable. This was these zones were chosen 2-3 years ago, and I think we need to move forward and help our areas of the state that we can. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman of 37th, Dr. Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to speak on this twice. I'll be brief. I do understand a little bit about how these zones were selected, and I just wanted to point, I'm going to vote for this because I'm all for economic development, but let's not kid ourselves. It's not about low-income communities. It is about economic development. If you look at where the zones are, I know that Kanawha County applied for several. The one that was denied was in the area that had the lowest income on average, and it was granted to the areas that were more economic development areas. There's a tract in Kanawha City, which is a commercial area. That was deemed an opportunity zone, where over in my neighborhood on the west side, the residential part was denied. I'm not sure that that was done by past legislatures. That was actually, I think all the counties submitted it to the governor's office, and the determination was made by somebody in the governor's office. So I'm going to vote for, I'm all for economic development, but this doesn't do much to address low-income communities.
Does the gentleman of 13th wish to close debate? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 95 ayes, 3 nays, 2 members absent not voting. A majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2828.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title was read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2830, establishing next generation 911 services in this state.
The gentleman of 28th, Doggett Pack, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the committee substitute for House Bill 2830. The purpose of this bill is to establish the next generation 911 system. The bill establishes a commission to advance next generation 911 in the state. The commission will provide a preliminary report before December 31st, 2019, and a final report by December 30th, 2020. The implementation of a next-generation 911 system will enhance the efforts of first responders to save lives by accepting text, video, and other modes of communication that we use generally with our cell phones. Mr. Speaker, that's the bill, and I urge its passage.
The question for the House is, shall the bill pass? Are the members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 98 ayes, 0 nays, 2 members absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2830.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and the Senate and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2837, relating to licensing of advanced deposit wagering.
The gentleman of 66, Douglas Espinoza, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we discussed last Friday, providers of advanced deposit wagering, also known as ADWs, are currently authorized by approximately 35 states, including West Virginia's neighboring states of Virginia, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and Maryland, and at least 5 additional state legislatures have been presented with ADW bills in 2016 and 2017. Although West Virginia does not affirmatively authorize or license ADWs, the state has never taken enforcement action to prohibit West Virginia residents, like our colleague from the 36th, from establishing accounts and placing wagers with ADWs. Thus, all the major ADWs, Twin Spires, ExpressBet, and TVG, just to name a few, currently accept wagers from West Virginia residents with no remuneration to West Virginia or the racing industry. House Bill 2837 would ensure that all current providers of advanced deposit wagering are properly regulated and that the West Virginia racing industry and the Racing Commission receive appropriate remuneration for such wagers. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage of the bill.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are the members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 77 ayes, 20 nays, 3 members absent not voting. A majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. Chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2837.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and the Senate and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2926, requiring the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs to study the housing needs of veterans.
The gentleman from the 28th Delegate Pack to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This House Bill 2926, the purpose of the bill is to require the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs to study the housing needs of veterans. The Secretary will conduct a study about the need for additional veterans' homes, general housing needs for veterans, and other veterans' needs for housing. On or before November 1st, 2019, the Secretary will submit their study to the Joint Committee on Health and the Joint Committee on Government and Finance containing the House needs of veterans, drafts of legislation to resolve those needs and where the need is greatest for additional veterans' homes. That's the bill, Mr. Speaker. I urge its passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from the 36th Delegate Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an excellent bill. The Secretary wants the bill. I think the members should know that believe it or not, we have a veterans home for homeless in Cabell County. It has 80 to 90 folks there. It's a 100-bed facility. It costs the state only $1.2 million a year. That's to house up to 100 homeless veterans. Now, that's the only home we have in the state, and what the Secretary is to do is to explore what possibilities there might be for other homes that are there. It is not for nursing care. It is not a nursing home bill. It's for him to study where we could have veterans' homes like the one in Cabell County for homeless veterans. And it's my opinion that probably elsewhere in the state, we probably have places that could qualify, and the cost to the state is very minimal. So I urge passage of the bill.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 97 ayes, 0 nays, 3 members absent not voting. A majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2926.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read, but the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and the Senate and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3024, West Virginia Business Ready Sites Program.
Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to postpone action 1 day on the bill.
Lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent to postpone action 1 day. Is there objection? Chair hears no objection. Action will be postponed 1 day. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 3045, exempting certain complimentary hotel rooms from hotel occupancy tax.
The lady from the 3rd, Dr. Storch, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill would prohibit the imposition of hotel occupancy tax on complimentary hotel rooms provided without charge by a hotel operator to guests. I urge passage.
Question for the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from the 45th, Delegate Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to request Rule 49 as I own a hotel.
As the gentleman has explained that factual situation, you would be a member of a class of greater than 5 individuals and therefore would be directed to vote. Are there other members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, the question for the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 96 ayes, 2 nays, 2 members absent not voting. A majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 3045.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read, but the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and the Senate and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 3132, relating to exempting providers that serve no more than 30 patients with office-based medication-assisted treatment.
The gentleman, 27th, Douglas Ellington, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill will permit a healthcare provider to treat no more than 30 patients with office-based medication-assisted treatment without having to comply with the legislative rule. The healthcare providers are required, though, to attest that counseling, drug screenings, and diversion control measures are being performed. Additionally, it exempts licensed behavioral health centers providing office-based medication-assisted treatment from registration requirements, but still requires them to attest that counseling, drug screening, and diversion control measures are being performed, and also provide information to the Office of Health Facilities Licensure and Certification, or OFLAC. Licensed behavioral health centers are already licensed by OFLAC. This is an attempt to remove duplicative regulations. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are the members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will... The clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 96 ayes, 2 nays, 2 members absent not voting, a majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 3132.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 3134, establish House Committee substitute for House Bill 3133, relating to requiring a parolee or probationer found to have suffered with addiction to participate in a support service.
The gentleman from the 29th, Douglas Steele, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 3133 relates to requiring certain persons placed on probation to attend a in-support service for substance abuse. First, the bill would require the Supreme Court to adopt a standardized risk and needs assessment for use by probation officers. It should be noted that the Supreme Court has already prescribed this in rules by practice, but we're simply putting that in the code. Secondly, it will require persons placed on probation who have a history of substance abuse to participate in a support service for a minimum of 60 days on a schedule that will be approved by the probation officer and agreed upon by the court. It is the hope that this bill will help those persons who are released on probation that have substance abuse history get the help they so desperately need. Mr. Speaker, I urge a passage.
The question for the House is, shall the bill pass? Are the members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? The gentleman at 36, Doggett Rowe.
Just for a question, if the gentleman would yield.
Gentleman does yield.
It says 60 days. Does that mean like 1 day a week or 4 days a month, or is it 60 days all at once? How would you expect that to be scheduled?
Well, this is written extremely broadly so that the court can do that at their discretion. So it could be, like to your point, somebody might be ordered to go once or twice a week to some type of outpatient counseling or one of the groups, the anonymous groups. It could be that the person's ordered to go up to 6 months of inpatient rehab. So we've tried to keep the latitude in there for the circuit court to kind of make a judgment call on that.
But as I see it, it's a minimum of 60 days.
That's true, yes.
And if it was once a week, then it would be more than a year once a week. But it says it would be scheduled by the probation officer, and I suppose they wouldn't have it interfere with work.
That's correct.
And other responsibilities. But a minimum of 60 days, would that be probably a minimum of 60 visits for treatment?
Well, it could be for treatment, it could be for counseling, it could be in a support group. It's written broadly to encapsulate all the different types of treatment.
And it doesn't have to relate to the offense for which they've been charged. It's just if they at any point in their lifetimes have had a substance abuse problem, then they would come under the requirements of this?
Well, I don't know if the gentleman's familiar with that tool that the court already uses, but they have a scalable result for how recent the substance abuse problem is and what the severity is. So that's something that probation officer and the court personnel are going to look at, and the judge make an ultimate, judgment call on something like that.
But the judge could interpose.
The judge could interpose as a condition of probation very specific things, but typically what a judge will do right now is say, he will put in as a condition of probation that the person on probation comply with all the substance abuse treatment requirements that are recommended by the probation officer. So even then, it's kind of open-ended. So it gives that probation officer a lot of latitude in determining, what types of programming that person's going to have.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, does the gentleman wish to close debate? Question for the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 98 ayes, 0 nays, 2 members absent not voting. A majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3133.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and the Senate and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 3134, establishing criminal penalties for negligent homicide and increasing criminal penalties for reckless driving.
The gentleman on 27th, Doug Schott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to amend the bill on third reading to correct a technical omission.
The gentleman 27th, Doug Schott, asks unanimous consent to offer an amendment on third reading. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill was intended, the phrase confined in jail was stricken and intended to be substituted the phrase imprisoned in a state correctional facility. The amendment seeks just to make that correction to the technical omission. Urge adoption.
Question before the House is the adoption of the amendment as just explained by the gentleman at 27th. Are there members who wish to speak to the amendment? If not, those in favor of the amendment will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the clerk will read the bill a third time.
House Bill 3134, establishing criminal penalties for negligent homicide and increasing criminal penalties for reckless driving.
The gentleman from the 27th, Doug Schott, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill simply intends to align the penalties for reckless driving that leads to death or serious bodily injury with the same type of penalties that in connection with driving under the influence that leads to death or serious bodily injury. By way of illustration, this past October 30, there was a crew from the Department of Transportation that had stopped outside the north side of the first tunnel you come to if you're driving up Interstate 77. Those of you who travel to Myrtle Beach, which is probably most of us, you'll know that tunnel. You go through that tunnel. There was this crew that had pulled over to the side of the road, and they had turned on their amber flashing lights, and they were there to help a stranded motorist. As they were standing there helping the stranded motorist, a driver came through the tunnel, probably about 60 miles an hour, veered off the side of the road and crossed the white line on the side of the road, did not hit his brakes until he was about 30 feet from the Department of Transportation vehicle and caught one of the members, a young man who's a father of 2 children, between his vehicle, the bumper of his vehicle, and the bumper of the vehicle that was exiting the tunnel. As a result, the young man was treated by the rescue squad, airlifted, and as a subsequent result of the injuries he had both legs amputated. That event really caused our prosecuting attorney to take a look at this area. Had that driver been intoxicated, the penalties would have been much more severe than had he been distracted. The evidence tends to indicate that he was texting as he exited that tunnel. Currently, the penalties for inflicting that type of serious bodily injury in a reckless driving type situation are only 10 days to 6 months in jail. What this bill does in the case of serious bodily injury is increase the penalty from 3 to 15 years. From 2 to 10 years. 2 to 10 years maximum. That aligns with the same penalty driving under the influence if you inflicted serious bodily injury. In the case of negligent homicide, had that driver killed the young man, the young father of 2, the criminal penalty is it's a misdemeanor only up to a year. What this bill does is give the judge the ability to sentence from 3 to 15 years in the event of a death. I will note that the National Safety Council indicated in 2016 there were 3,450 people that were killed as a result of distracted driving incidents not involving alcoholism. I think this is a necessary change. This is not the only incident where reckless driving has caused serious bodily injury or even death. Therefore, I think that this makes it those penalties in line with the similar penalties for driving under the influence. And Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question for the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from the 36th Delegate Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I strongly oppose this bill because it does nothing other than raise a minimum penalty and take the judge's authority to sentence to less than 3 years away. And you say, well, why are we doing this? Well, to be consistent with DUI, DUI is a very defined offense. It's something people engage in intentionally. This bill will be able to turn a 3-year minimum felony into something because you forgot your glasses when you were going to run to the store that you need to drive, but you just thought, well, it's not very far, I'll just go on, and you hit somebody. They don't have to die, they just have to have a serious bodily injury. What's that? A trip to the hospital? Is it 6 weeks of physical therapy? What's the injury that's required to invoke a 3-year minimum prison sentence? This is prison sentence. What if you drive 5 miles over what everybody is told is probably okay, making it 15 miles over the speed limit? If you hit anybody and cause any kind of injury, you're going to have a 3-year minimum prison sentence in prison. What else? Let's say that we stay as a body here a little late and you decide, I need to go home because I've got to, and you fall asleep and drive across the center line and crash into another car, or drive over an embankment and hurt somebody in your own car. 3 years. Now, there's no need to make this offense consistent with DUI. DUI, there's an advertisement on TV about DUI offenses constantly. We have a whole system to deal with that. It should be, I think it may be, I don't know what the DUI penalty is, but it's certainly more than the 1 year. I'd like to be corrected by any of the prosecutors in the room. It used to be, anyway, that that involuntary manslaughter was a 1-year penalty. Now, it may have been increased, I don't know. But the point is that there's no need for us to keep raising minimum penalties here. And I don't want to turn it into a money issue. We heard from corrections that, it's $25,000 a year to house somebody in the prison. It's not about that, and I agree. And I think it's really tragic when someone is seriously injured or is killed as a result of negligent driving and certainly of reckless driving. But please understand, reckless driving is a very low standard as an offense. It's something that's incidental, that might just come upon you because you make a poor judgment. You drive and fall asleep and hurt somebody. You forget your glasses. You drive 15 miles over the speed limit whenever on the interstates, everybody's told that the state police probably won't stop unless you're over 10 miles over the speed limit. So the point is that there's not intentional behavior required. When you have a 3-year minimum prison sentence facing you, there ought to have been something you did intentionally to cause the accident. This doesn't require that. It says it just needs to be a little bit more than carelessness. Now, this is generally we shouldn't be just raising minimum penalties because it doesn't do any good. If somebody deserves to be in the prison for longer than a year, the judge sentences one to whatever it is here, and I'm not sure what it is currently, for a certain period. This is for reckless behavior. This is for negligent behavior. This is not for intentional, purposeful behavior. And the prosecutors then could help us, but I believe you can commit a whole lot of really mean offenses and get a 1-year minimum, where you intend to hit somebody, where you intend to stab somebody, where you intend to do something that's illegal and that you know is illegal whenever you do it. That's not involved in this statute. Your behavior can be merely a little more than carelessness. It's something that's incidental, it's circumstantial, it happens, And I'll say it probably happens to all of us in this room at some point in some way. If you don't clean off your windshield, that's pretty reckless whenever it gets to be snowy. So there are all sorts of things where you don't intend to hurt anybody. You just want to get through your day. You can be convicted of a felony for any of the things I talked about, but your minimum penalty is going to be 1 year. And I would contend that that's probably appropriate. So, Mr. Speaker, I would urge that the members vote against the bill.
The gentleman from 29th, Douglas Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, after listening to all that, I just have to say it's just completely inaccurate. The definition of reckless contained in this statute is not a simple mistake, is not a simple oversight. It is not the result of being behind a tractor trailer and not having enough windshield wiper fluid. This section of the code contemplates your level of recklessness is at a point to where it is intentional conduct. You are in reckless disregard for the safety of others. Simply falling asleep as an oversight wouldn't rise to the levels, you know, in this statute. And, you know, when we look at the situations that have occurred, you know, the chairman talked about a situation down near the tunnel in my neck of the woods in Raleigh County just recently. We had a Marine, brother Marine, who was a recruiter locally in Raleigh County and had done many tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. I can't remember if it was, I want to say it was 7, but I could be wrong about that. Highly decorated, had a wife, had a young son who was about 3 years old, and he was going to work one morning at the recruiting station, and a garbage truck that was driving erratically with the forks down, okay, the forks on the garbage truck that pick up the bins. He was driving around 6 in the morning with the forks down, speeding, disobeying the traffic laws because he thought nobody would be on the road. He hit that Marine's Jeep and killed him. That's recklessness. When you are just blatant disregard for the law, driving around with 8, 10-foot spikes coming out of the front of your truck, that's what we're talking about. When you're driving 85 miles an hour down the road and you're texting and you kill someone, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about forgetting your glasses at home. We're not talking about forgetting to refill your windshield wiper fluid. You know, we're not talking about anything like that. And if you look at this statute, the gentleman said something that is completely false. This minimum of 3 years in prison. You're not disqualified from getting probation or alternative sentencing under this statute. Okay, so even if you were convicted of this elevated crime, that would be a felony, 3 to 15, okay, you could still get a grant of probation, you could still get a grant of alternative sentencing, just like you could in any other case. But what we have right now is a lot of problems on the road that the chairman talked about, that I just talked to you about, where folks are not just not paying attention, not just being negligent, but they're behind the wheel of 3,500 pounds of steel moving at 80, 85 miles an hour, and they're on their cell phone. They're not paying attention. They are not caring. And we're not talking about just being negligent, but their actions rise to the level of intentional because of the reckless disregard that they have for the safety of others. And this is a good bill. This is a needed bill. And I've had so many people from your districts, not just mine, who, when this came through Judiciary Committee, I got emails and phone calls begging to support this bill from people whose families have been affected by this sort of reckless disregard for the safety of others. You know, our constituents are crying out for these kind of protections, and this is needed because what we see right now is the situations like the chairman went over, nothing happens to somebody. But here, the statute's here that if the conduct rises to this level, that a prosecutor has the ability to bring a case that fits the crime. And I'm sorry, but it is a crime when you're traveling 85, 90 miles an hour with no regard for the safety of anyone else and you kill a fellow citizen. That is a crime, and it needs prosecuted. And I would urge all the members to pass this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 55th, Douglas Spinagle.
Will the chairman yield for some questions?
Chairman does yield for questions.
What's the current, how much speed are you allowed to go over the speed limit before you get charged with reckless driving?
I'm going to tell you what my best recollection is. I think it's 15 miles before you could be charged with 15 miles over the posted speed limit before they could assess a reckless driving charge.
Okay, so let me give you a hypothetical then. Let's say I have an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old in a car, and say it straight away, but let's say it's posted at 55 and they're going 72 miles an hour or thereabouts over the posted limit. And the 18-year-old wrecks the car. And his passenger then, let's say, gets a broken arm or gets mangled or whatever, but survives. Now, instead of that driver, that 18-year-old driver, of looking at 10 days to 6 months of a misdemeanor offense, now that 18-year-old driver is looking at 2 to 10 years in the penitentiary for felony offense, if this were the pass. Is that correct?
Well, it technically could be, depending on how the officer that investigates decides to charge, how the prosecutor decides to charge. Certainly could discharge failure to maintain control, any number of crimes. So depending on the severity of the circumstances, you have to weigh in the discretion that's given to both the officer, the prosecutor, the probation officers, the judge. But technically, under the statute, if serious bodily injury arises as a result, and keep in mind that the definition of reckless doesn't say anything about 15 miles over the speed limit. My understanding is that officers won't assess that charge until it's at least 15 over the speed limit. But the statute says willful or wanton disregard for the safety of persons or property. So that would be a determination whether that conduct rose to that level before I think a prosecutor would pursue that charge.
Like same scenario, except they're not going 18-year-olds driving, 19-year-olds passenger. Say they're going 58 on a 55, but the 18-year-old's getting dinged with text and it takes their eyes down. Text response, again, same scenario, they wreck. And the passenger gets injured. Doesn't die, but gets injured. 19-year-old gets injured. This would be the same type of circumstance. You could charge him, instead of doing 10 days to 6 months, now they're looking at 2 to 10 years in the penitentiary.
If the prosecutor decided it rose to the level of willful and wanton disregard, it could charge that, sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, speak to the bill.
Gentleman, may proceed.
We have traditionally and historically taken the position in here that DUI is the worst thing that you can do on the roads. And by doing this, we're devaluing that and saying, no, it doesn't really matter. DUI is the equivalent of texting. DUI is the equivalent of driving down the roads and not paying attention and getting wrecked and injuring people. If it's the policy decision to raise this level up to the same level of DUI, then we're saying, one, either DUI is the equivalent of texting and driving, or to me, the logic has always been that DUI is the worst thing you can do in the laws because you put yourself and others at risk when you're doing this. This is simply negligence. And accidents happen, and they particularly happen with young people. When you get your driver's license at the age of 16, you're probably, I can speak for myself, I probably wouldn't consider myself a good driver until I reached the age of 30. It just takes years of experience, and I've wrecked quite a few vehicles in my lifetime. And thank God nobody's ever been injured with me. We've had been banged up, but it probably for my lack of experience and being a little heavy on the foot. This is setting up a circumstance where a lot of young people in particular can be charged and have their whole lives ruined over a felony offense just for poor judgment. You're being aggressive behind the wheel, various things like that. Now, I appreciate the intent, and what's being attempted to be here, is particularly of our DOH personnel out there on the roads, I think is what the chairman said, and I certainly appreciate that, on these work zone violations. But I think there would be easier and smarter ways to craft criminal legislation such as that when you're going through work zones to increase the penalties there rather than just making it broad and blanket across everybody. So I just think this is really not the wisest piece of legislation. We're going down. You're going to put a lot of young people in particular at risk on this. They get that scarlet F on them, and you're setting them up for failure the rest of their lives. For those reasons, I'm going to vote no.
The gentleman of 13th, Cadle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman yield?
Yes.
I don't know where I'm at on this. I had a friend got killed on 35. He was behind traffic, made a left turn on a farm tractor. Guy comes up on the left side, 70 mile an hour, hits him, kills him. That man should have spent time in prison. But I'm going to give you another scenario. I drive truck, as everybody knows. Let's say I got a brake loose that I didn't know about. I got a tire balled just a little bit below the federal level, and maybe a few other little problems. And I'm going 75 or 80 mile an hour, and somebody pulls out in front of me, and I T-bone them and kill them. All right, this is going to open the door. I was in DOT violations with the truck. Now I got to spend 3 years in prison for an accident. Would that be right?
Well, a couple of things there. First of all, if somebody pulled out in front of you, it wasn't your fault. But secondly, if you think if you had a technical DOT violation that you were unaware of, then I don't see how it would be a willful or wanton disregard for the safety of others. Now, if you pulled into let's suppose you pulled into a service station and somebody said to you, your brakes are rotten, your tires are bald, you could kill somebody, and you ignored that and you drove on down the highway, perhaps then there would be a finding of willful and wanton disregard. Keep in mind, we should not discount the good judgment of our judges and prosecutors to decide each case based on its own facts. In your situation, although you could technically be exposed to that if you knew and disregarded the safety violations of your 18-wheeler, the judge could still find and put you on probation, even though he found you guilty. So, this penalty is only going to be imposed in those severe cases that we discussed. And I think the gentleman from the 29th situation would certainly justify that type of death. That man is no less dead than if he had been hit by a drunk driver. He's no less dead, right? The gentleman in the situation I talked to has no less loss of limbs than if he was hit by a drunk driver. So these are for the most extreme situations when prosecutors feel basically impotent to impose an appropriate penalty for extreme situations. It does not, though, deprive a judge of the ability to exercise leniency, to suspend sentences, to use alternative sentences, community service, under the circumstances.
Well, trucking's a little different. I know you're not familiar with it, but I know of a case in Ohio that this sort of thing happened. People forgot where they were going to turn off and made a U-turn in front of a semi. He T-boned and killed him. And because he had a brake out of adjustment, they said he should have not been on the road. Now, you know how the ambulance chasers are. But that was $1 million plus lawsuit. And I'm afraid we're going to open ourselves up to, I know the intent of the bill, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how to make it do what we need to do, but I don't know. I think I'm no on it. I just see this it's going to be a big cost on the trucking industry. We're going to be liable for all the accidents.
Once again, it has to be willful or wanton disregard for safety.
But if you have a violation of any kind and you didn't know it, even though you didn't know it, you're supposed to do an inspection every morning. And let's say you're going down the road and, our roads are in such good shape, you could hit a bump and knock a taillight out and not know it. But now you're in violation while you're still moving down the road and you didn't know it.
Then it's not willful because you didn't know it, right? It's
But
not
I'd have to
wanton
prove
because you
that.
had no way to know about it.
Right. But anyway, thank you.
Sure.
The gentleman, the fourth, Canestraro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the bill here today. The gentleman from the 29th is correct. There's nothing in this bill that says that the judge must sentence somebody that is convicted under this statute to prison time. Basically, it's all about discretion, ladies and gentlemen. It's about giving prosecutors the discretion to do a little more in situations like this. The example that I can give from my experience is this. We had a gentleman that was under the influence of a substance, now a controlled substance, that you cannot test for or prove was in his system. You may ask, what substance was that? Well, I'm going to tell you, compressed air. You know, the cans of air, the duster stuff that you see, you can buy at Walmart and clean off your laptop or your keyboard on your home computer. He had huffed a can of compressed air in the Walmart parking lot in Moundsville, drove south on Route 2, passed out, going the normal speed limit, went off the road and into a parking lot at a local service station where there were DOH workers working right off of the road near the parking lot. He slammed into 3 DOH workers and disabled one of them. Another one suffered broken bones. Without this law passing, all you could do to that individual is what is in law now for reckless driving, which would be not more than 90 days. With this law, for something so extreme as that, being under the influence of a substance that you can never prove was in his system, although they found the can of compressed air in the vehicle, we can actually do something to that individual for breaking legs and disabling somebody that was working for the state of West Virginia as a DOH worker. So I would ask that you support the bill.
The gentleman, the sixth, Dr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I speak to the bill?
Gentleman, may proceed.
We don't have to have speed as something that kills here with a vehicle. Many years ago, I was going through a town. I was in second gear in a 3-speed vehicle with 3 other people in the vehicle with me. And a guy who wasn't drunk, he wasn't under the influence, came across the center line and hit me head on. And 2 of those people died as a result of that. There was no way to charge the driver of that vehicle. There was nothing that could be done that could remedy the problem that existed. I say that to say this. We've talked a lot about being 15 miles over the speed limit. We've talked a lot about things like that, about drinking and about big trucks. But this involved me. And not a day goes by that I don't wish that I could have seen that guy coming and veered to the right or the left very quickly and perhaps saved my mother's life. But she perished in that accident as a result of a guy who was negligent, and nothing was done. This bill, Mr. Speaker, may be the beginning of seeing that things like that don't happen again. Thank you. I urge support of the bill.
Does the gentleman, the 27th, wish to close debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me just inform the members that the National Safety Council indicates that you are 6 times more likely to cause an accident when you're driving distracted than when you're under the influence of alcohol. 6 times more likely to cause an accident. The person that you hit will be no less injured when you're driving distracted than the person than if you were driving under the influence. And you're 6 times more likely to cause that injury. Those 3,450 people that died from distracted drivers in 2016 are no less dead than they would have been if they'd been hit by a drunk driver. This bill basically just gives the prosecutor and a judge more latitude, more discretion on those very severe cases where it's clear that the accused was driving in willful or wanton disregard for the safety of other persons. But it doesn't deny the judge the ability to exercise discretion and impose other sentences in situations that aren't as extreme. This is long overdue and definitely needed. Ladies and gentlemen, please pass this bill.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 63 ayes, 33 nays, 4 members absent not voting, a majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 3134.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House and the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 3135, expiring funds to the balance of the Department of Commerce Development Office.
The gentleman, the 10th, Doug Chris, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon. The purpose of this supplemental appropriation is to expire $500,000 from the auditor's office, purchasing card administration fund to the development fund, entrepreneurship and innovation investment fund. The $500,000 will serve as seed money to allow the state to match federal grants as outlined in a bill earlier, House Bill 2550. I urge passage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result of this question. There are 97 ayes, 0 nays, 3 members absent not voting. A majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 3135.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I move the bill take effect from passage.
The lady from the 49th moves the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result of this question. There are 94 ayes, 0 nays, 6 members absent not voting, 2/3 of those elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House and the Senate and request concurrence therein. Are there further bills on third reading? If not, bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2011, Road Maintenance Program.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Fleischauer moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Fleischauer 2-25, number 2.
Okay.
1-25.
HFA Fleischauer 2-25, number 1.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lady may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All right, this is an amendment to 2011, which is a really good bill. The purpose of 2011 is to enhance road maintenance. I don't know about the rest of you, but road maintenance is the #1 issue in my county. I would say it is a crisis, maybe in the whole state. And this amendment does 4 things. First, it creates a pilot project. Second, it requires that there be 3 of these pilots in each county in District 4. And what the pilots are is they would combine paving and maintenance. So you would contract out like the DOH normally does with a paving company that would do a certain stretch of roads, and that company for 7 years would be required to do the ditching, would be required to do the mowing, and you would think that if they did that initial paving contract, they would maybe do a better job, and it would provide some relief to the understaffed DOH regional districts. And then at the end of that 7 years, the DOH would evaluate whether this combination paving and maintenance works. It's something that was suggested by one of our DOH highway engineers, and I think it sounds like a good idea.
Mr. Speaker, this fits within the purpose of enhancing road maintenance. It's just another tool in toolbox. I recommend passage.
The question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. Are there members who wish to speak to the amendment? The gentleman in the 56th, Douglas Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the gentlelady's amendment is well intended, I have to rise in opposition. First of all, the bill before us creates a new program for doing the road maintenance, and it will generate reports. From those reports, we can make changes to see how we can do things better. One other thing that concerns me about this, by requiring the contractor to do all of the maintenance as well, having formerly worked road construction, some of this equipment they would not have. This would severely limit the people who could even bid on these contracts and may drive up cost. Therefore, I urge rejection of the gentlelady's amendment.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the adoption of the amendment? Does the lady wish to close debate on the amendment?
Thank you. This project would also require a report, and I don't see any reason why the fact that on the main contracting out is going to require reports would mean that this would be any problem. This report wouldn't be done until 7 years because road paving usually lasts about that long. And also, counties could contract with pavers only to do a portion of the maintenance. It seems to me that it may not make sense to do snow removal, but it might make sense to have a maintenance contract where they did the paving and they did the mowing, they did the ditching, they know that road, and they would do the potholes, and they could keep it that way. I think that it's a good idea. We ought to try it, and I would like to see this adopted as an experiment and expand it if it works. So I urge adoption.
The question for the House is the adoption of the amendment as just explained by the lady from the 51st. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. No. Division's been demanded. Roll call's been demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Those in favor of the amendment as explained by the lady from the 51st will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 40 ayes, 58 nays, 2 members absent, not voting, less than a majority having voted in the affirmative. Chair declares the amendment lost. Are there further amendments?
Delegate Fleischauer moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Fleischauer 2-25, number 2 revised.
The lady from the 51st.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this does, and I noticed there was a mistake in the amendment, this would have, I think this also has to do with road maintenance. Even if this bill is adopted, there will still have to be local maintenance done because there's so many conditions in 2011. We are not going to totally eliminate road maintenance done by local highway offices. In my county, our staffing is unbelievably low. It was originally supposed to be 67, and now it's down to under 20. It's no wonder that maintenance doesn't get done. And why is that? It's because the city pays more, the county pays more, the oil and gas pays more. The salary is so low that we cannot recruit anyone, and the ones who are there are unbelievably loyal, but it just doesn't do the job. And we have abysmal roads in my county. I don't know about the rest of you, but I know they're abysmal. What this does is similar to what we did last year. Last year, we raised the salary of corrections workers by $2,000 a year for 3 years. That was because there was a crisis in corrections. I don't know about you, but there's a crisis in road maintenance in this state, and especially around anywhere that I have driven. This would raise it by $3,000 a year for 3 years. That would make it competitive. If you want maintenance employees who want to be doing maintenance and want to have a decent living, then you will vote in favor of this amendment. I urge adoption. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 56th, Douglas Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Inquiry, is the gentlelady's amendment germane?
The chair is of the opinion that the fundamental purpose of the bill is road maintenance, is contracting of road maintenance rather than continuation of road maintenance by DOH workers. It would be the opinion of the chair that the gentleman's point of order is well taken. The lady from the 51st.
Might I respond to that, Mr. Speaker?
Proceed.
Okay, I agree with you that except that the title of the article is enhancing road maintenance. Even if the bill is adopted, there will still be local maintenance because there are so many requirements in the bill. There are not going to be contractors who bid on every single one of these contracts. They are not going to be able to meet the requirements, every single one of them. And so for that reason, I believe that it is germane. I think we're having a crisis. If we don't increase these salaries, it's going to take several years before all these contracts are let. I think we should raise these salaries so that people will have dignity in their job and they'll know we desperately need our roads maintained. If there's anybody that disagrees with that, and even though I think the bill is good, and I think we should move in that direction, we're not going to be able to immediately do that. And for that reason, I believe it is germane because it enhances road maintenance.
It would be the ruling of the chair that the gentleman's point of order is well taken. For what purpose does the gentleman from the 51st, Second Williams, seek recognition? It would be the ruling of the chair that the gentleman's point of order is well taken. The gentleman. For what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
Is the lady's amendment being considered?
The chair has ruled the gentleman's point of order is well taken, that the amendment is not germane to the bill. Are there further amendments? If not, bill will be advanced. Further bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2014, West Virginia Intellectual Property and Trade Secrets Act.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Robinson moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Robinson 2-25, number 1.
Does the gentleman 36 wish to explain the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment was offered in committee, and as we discussed it probably needed a little bit more vetting, so we gave some time and allowed those to ask questions of others. But the amendment, basically, the trade secrets and definitions made in this, I had some concerns that delivery of Schedule II opioids and items of that case, their shipping manifolds may be defined as trade secrets and not allowed in litigation or other forms. And this amendment just simply clarifies that the definition of trade secrets does not include the marketing and distribution of any substance regulated under Schedule II of the Controlled Substance Act. So I would urge passage.
The question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. The gentleman 27th, Delegate Schott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman from the 36th is correct. We had substantial discussion about this topic and a proposed amendment during our committee meeting. The purpose of the bill basically is to extend protections to those who have trade secrets beyond what might otherwise be available if that trade secret was converted into a patent. The gentleman's amendment does not do any harm to the intent of the bill. It certainly addresses a subject of great concern to all of us and certainly a current subject of concern. I don't think there's any problem with including this in the bill. I'm not sure it's necessary, but at the same time, it does no harm, and therefore I would urge adoption of the gentleman's amendment.
The question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. Does the gentleman wish to close debate? If not, those in favor of the amendment will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. The gentleman's amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2049 relating to a prime contractor's responsibility for wages and benefits.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Schott moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Schott 2-25, number 1.
The gentleman 27th will explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill seeks to bring some balance to a situation involving the liability of a prime contractor to the employees of a subcontractor. The bill that came before the committee had a reference or a portion of the code dealing with mechanics liens for employees of subcontractors that deprived an employee of the ability to seek a mechanics lien. Subsequent discussions about this and a review of the statutes that protect homeowners from mechanics lien leads us to believe that there's adequate protection for individual homeowners. Therefore, the amendment seeks to remove from the bill any reference to the mechanics lien exclusion. Mr. Speaker, I urge adoption of the amendment.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Are the members who wish to speak to the adoption of the amendment? If not, those in favor of the amendment will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2378, relating generally to grounds for revocation of a teaching certificate.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Foster moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Foster 2-25, number 1.
Does the gentleman from the 15th, Delegate Foster, wish to explain the amendment?
Yes.
Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you. In our consideration of this bill in Judiciary Committee, there's a section in there that mentions, when it mentions the code and it mentions the sexual abuse section of the code, and it refers to of this code being West Virginia code. And what I'm trying to add in there is the words or comparable statute in any other state. Therefore, if this deals with licensure revoking, if somebody commits a sexual abuse or abuse crime in another state, it would also be affected and wouldn't just have to be under the code of our state. I would urge adoption.
The question for the House is the adoption of the amendment as just explained by the gentleman from the 15th. The gentleman from the 48th, Delegate Hamrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman's amendment strengthens the bill. I urge adoption.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the adoption of the amendment as just explained by the gentleman from the 15th? If not, those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2396, West Virginia Fresh Food Act.
Are there amendments? Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2397, requiring county school boards to provide adequate mental health and counseling services.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2497, relating to whistleblower law.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2535, relating to purchasing exemptions and procedures.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2617, relating to the form for making offer of optional uninsured and underinsured coverage by insurers.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2662, relating to certificates or employment of school personnel.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Foster moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Foster 2-25, number 1.
Does the gentleman from the 15th, Delegate Foster, wish to explain the amendment?
Yes.
Gentleman may proceed.
This is just the same amendment referring to other states' code, same thing as the other bill.
Are there members who wish to speak to the adoption of the amendment? If not, those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2665, supplemental appropriation for PEIA rainy day fee.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2670, relating to damages for medical monitoring.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2703, relating to refunds of excise taxes collected from dealers of petroleum products.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2760, relating to performance reviews of state agencies and regulatory boards.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2802, Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act.
Are there amendments?
Delegates Fast and Schott move to amend the bill. This is HFA Fast and Schott, number 1, 2-25.
Does the gentleman 27th, Delegate Schott, wish to explain the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment basically is focused on the uniform partition bill that we've enacted. It's a kind of a complex bill, but basically what happened once we passed it out of committee is we got some assistance from a person who works on the Uniform Acts Commission to reorganize it and restructure the bill somewhat, but not change the substance of it. It's really two parts to the amendment. The first part reorganizes and clarifies language that was found in Section 3 concerning when to apply the new bill to a partition suit and when to apply the current partition statute. It contains a test and a few exceptions. The second part of the amendment is a rewrite of Section 5 of the bill concerning a court's discretion to appoint commissioners to partition property. The rewrite of this section isolates the applicability of the section to the new bill. With the amendment, the appointment of a court of commissioners by a court of commissioners under the current statute will remain unaffected. This amendment, in effect, helps to isolate the application of this new language from the existing partition suit. In general, what we basically done was simply restructure and clarify the bill without making any substantive changes to its focus. Mr. Speaker, I urge adoption.
The question for the House is the adoption of the amendment as just explained by the gentleman from the 27th. Are the members who wish to speak to the amendment? If not, those in favor of the amendment will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2831, finding and declaring certain claims against the state and its agencies to be moral obligations of the state.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2850, relating to qualifications for a commercial driver's license.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2853, establishing the West Virginia Program for Open Education Resources.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2866, relating to the termination, expiration, or cancellation of oil or gas leases.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2895, allowing victims of certain crimes to get a restraining order.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2931, clarifying that the State Lottery Commission has no authority over non-lottery games.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2943, relating to deliveries by wine specialty shop.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2945, relating to vendors paying a single annual fee for a permit issued by local health department.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2974, exempting businesses relating to transporting certain used tires to storage, disposal, or recycling locations from provisions of chapter.
Are there amendments?
Delegates C.R. Martin and P. Martin move to amend the bill. This is HFA Martin, CR, and Martin, P. 2-25.
Does the gentleman from the 46th, Douglas Martin, wish to explain the amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. What our amendment does would strike out Section 15 of this bill, which, if you all are familiar with the bill, what this bill does is actually lifts the certification, the regulation off of allowing who's allowed to transport trash, transport tires and used tires. And I want to strike out Section 15. You know, when this law was placed several years ago, the reason why this is a regulated business is because what was happening was people were taking these tires and actually going down the road, going down an old hauler, taking them, throwing them out on the side of the hill and letting them go into rivers and things. And so, you know, what my amendment would do is to make those people certified and licenses. What the bill also does in Section 16 is allow the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection to transport those tires without a certification. You know, I think that there is a problem in this field of work that only a certain amount of people are allowed to transport those tires, but I believe that the DEP should be able to transport those tires because they will make sure that those tires are properly disposed of. You know, I really feel like that that we've regulated this business for a reason, and you know, I ask for support. Thank you.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment as just explained by the gentleman on the 46th. The gentleman on the 56th, Douglas Howe.
I rise to oppose the gentleman's amendment. The purpose of this bill is to deregulate in-state haulers of used tires. Under the current system, according to the PSC, there are 8 people licensed to haul used tires in the state of West Virginia. However, we do not regulate businesses from outside the state, and any business from outside the state can come in and haul tires out. What we are doing, what the gentleman's amendment would do, would eliminate job creation in the state for those people wishing to start a business to haul these tires.
Also, the EP or DEP already regulates the disposal of these tires. That remains in effect. What the effect of the gentleman's amendment would have is to continue to allow out-of-state companies unrestricted hauling in and out of our state, at the same time restricting West Virginians from actually getting into the business. Therefore, I oppose the gentleman's amendment.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the adoption of the amendment as explained by the gentleman from the 46th? Does the gentleman wish to close debate?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I understand the tone of the bill, and, you know, talking with the sponsor, I think it has good intentions of an unregulating business. I believe in free market. I believe that let the private sector work. But what this bill does is it takes a little too far. We regulate our trash business here in West Virginia. We regulate so many things because of problems just like this. You know, when you take a business like this and you're taking it from regulating it, obviously, yeah, it's going to drive the price down, but it wouldn't be fair for me to come into the business, undercut somebody that is properly disposing of these tires, and then turning around and charging more or charging less just so I can dispose of those tires improperly. You know, I feel like that this has been in effect for a while for a reason. People just didn't come in here and just make up this rule for no reason. It was because of the amount of trash. Everybody has, if you look around your district, you have trash laying around on the side of the roads. You have tires laying around on the side of the roads. But since this has taken effect, it has become a lot better system because it has been regulated. You know, I just kind of look at it as there are several of these companies in the state. The DEP every year they take a tires back every year for free, and this bill with this section out of it still will allow the Department of Environmental Protection to transport those tires for somebody that is not licensed. And so I think that part of it is very important, but taking this part of it out of it makes it the door wide open for taking these tires and just tossing them over the hill somewhere. We all know it happens. So I ask for support of the bill and ask for the yeas and nays.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment as just explained by the gentleman from the 46th. The yeas and nays have been demanded. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. Those in favor of the adoption of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result of this question. There are 49 ayes, 49 nays, 2 members absent not voting, less than a majority having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the amendment lost. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2991 relating to the Ryan Brown Addiction Prevention and Recovery Fund.
Are there amendments?
No. Delegate Ellington moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Ellington 2-25, number 1.
Does the gentleman from the 27th wish to explain the amendment?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What the amendment does, in the bill, the Ryan Brown Fund can have proceeds that are recovered from any judgments or settlements from drug manufacturers, wholesalers, or retailers, have those funds deposited in the fund. What the amendment does just states that provided, however, that state agencies may recover any reasonable administrative costs, contractual damages, or expenses that were incurred in the pursuit of the litigation prior to the proceeds being distributed to the fund. This is something that was also asked for by the executive. Mr. Speaker, I would urge passage of the amendment.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment as just explained by the gentleman from the 27th. The gentleman from the 36th, Doug Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman yield?
Chairman does yield.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, what agencies would be taking on litigation?
I guess anything as far as if an Attorney General's agency or any Inspector General, things like that, whatever.
Okay, so the Attorney General, who pays for their expenses now?
Well,
West
that's,
Virginia
I guess theirs are in the, taxpayer as far as what's given to them in the budget.
So we give them money in the budget to act as the attorney for the state and take on litigations on behalf of the state. But then when we get money that we're directing towards substance abuse treatment we're going to take out expenses and give him more money for expenses and reimburse him for expenses we already paid for?
My understanding is not about the Attorney General stuff, it's about DHR reimbursing for expenses that were incurred in obtaining those funds.
Okay, thank you.
The gentleman, the 17th, Dr. Rohrbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to speak in favor of the gentleman's amendment. The purpose of this is to redirect the money to the Ryan Brown Fund. But we do have to understand there are times when the Attorney General will hire outside counsel to assist with these litigations. So I don't think taking the expenses out is at all unreasonable, and it doesn't have anything to do with changing the impetus of this bill, which is to get the money recovered from opioid lawsuits into the Ryan Brown Addiction Treatment and Recovery Fund. So with that in mind, I would ask members to vote for the gentleman's amendment.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the adoption of the amendment? If not, does the gentleman wish to close debate on the amendment? If not, the question for the House is the adoption of the amendment as just explained by the gentleman from the 27th. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3016 relating to the State Aeronautics Commission.
For what purpose does the gentleman from the 44th, Douglas Hannah, seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to move to reconsider my vote on the amendment by C. Martin and P. Martin on House Bill 2974.
Clerk will finish reading the bill a second time for Committee substitute for House Bill 3016.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3016 relating to the State Aeronautics Commission.
Are there amendments? No. If not, the bill will be advanced. The gentleman from the 44th, Delegate Hannah, has moved to reconsider his vote, on the amendment offered by the gentleman from the 46th, Delegate Martin, on committee substitute for House Bill 2974. How did the gentleman vote on the amendment?
The gentleman voted nay.
Voted
against
nay?
the amendment.
Okay, the gentleman has voted on the prevailing side, therefore the gentleman is entitled to make the motion. The question for the House is a motion by the gentleman from the 44th that the vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from the 46th, Delegate Martin, be reconsidered. This is a debatable motion. Are there members who wish to speak to the adoption of the motion to reconsider? The gentleman from the 56th, Delegate Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would speak against the gentleman's motion. If we do reconsider this amendment and the amendment would pass, it would increase the number of tires thrown out in the middle of the state because right now we do not have enough haulers in the middle of the state to get rid of them.
The gentleman from the 27th, Douglas Porterfield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quick point of inquiry, and then I would like to speak to the bill. If it was a tie on the vote, can it be reconsidered?
In a tie vote, the negative vote is considered the prevailing side.
Very good, thank you. I'd like to ask the lead sponsor of the amendment to yield to question.
Of the amendment?
Yes.
That would be the gentleman from the 46th. Does the gentleman yield for a question? Gentleman does yield.
Quick question. How many haulers are in our state currently?
I'm hearing that there's 8, but you know, that doesn't hold back from anybody else going into hauling this as long as they go through that process of becoming a hauler.
Understood. Who is the largest hauler in our state?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Who is the largest hauler in our state?
I'm not sure.
I think would you have someone in your district that hauls these tires?
We do have one of these in our district. As far as disposing them, the company that is in my district, they haul, but they also dispose of them. This does not have anything to do with disposing of the tires. It only has to do with transporting the tires.
Thank you. I'd like to speak to the amendment, please.
Gentleman may proceed.
I think that this is a terrible amendment. I think it's very, very clear that there are some personal gains from my very dear colleagues in the 46th.
Point of order has been raised. The gentleman from the 50th for a point of order.
just a little confused. He's speaking to the amendment. We are still on the motion to reconsider. Am I correct, Mr. Speaker?
Both members are correct. We are on the motion to reconsider. However, debate on a motion to reconsider, to the extent it's debatable, may reach the underlying question to be reconsidered. The gentleman from the 27th may continue.
Put my back on. And I'd like to thank the gentleman from the 50th for correcting that. I appreciate you. But I do believe that this is something that would be a personal benefit or something in a particular district as to why this is going on. I would ask us to, once again, not pass this amendment. And on the reconsideration of it, I would ask everyone to not reconsider this motion. Thank you.
The gentleman, the 46th, Douglas Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd, of course, like to rise in favor of the gentleman's motion. You know, talking about somebody benefiting from this is something that everybody will benefit from. You know, not having tires in all of our creeks, having tires thrown out on the side of the road, I think this will benefit everybody in this room, so I'd ask support of the gentleman's motion.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the question of reconsideration? Does the gentleman from the 44th wish to close debate on the motion? If not, the question before the House is, shall the vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from the 46th, Delegate Martin, on committee substitute for House Bill 2974 be reconsidered? Roll call has been demanded. Is demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result of this question. There are 53 ayes, 45 nays, 2 members absent not voting. Majority having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the motion adopted. The question before the House now is back on committee substitute for House Bill 2974 and the amendment as offered by the gentleman from the 46th, Douglas Martin. This is a debatable question. Are there members who wish to speak to the adoption of the amendment? The gentleman from the 40th, Delegate Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I introduced this amendment because one of my constituents had actually applied to haul tires. As you all are well aware, 40th District, the site of the 2016 flood, we are overrun with tires everywhere. Not just our garages that have them. The way it was explained, we have just a few haulers from the center of the state. Stuff's not getting picked up in our area. Tires being hauled out of the rivers are not getting picked up. This gentleman went to the Public Service Commission and asked for a permit to haul tires, just to haul them, whether it be to disposal or whether he started his own business of disposal. He was denied, basically because we have a few people doing it and they have a monopoly on it. That's all we're wanting to do is expand this and get our 40th District cleaned up. I'd appreciate your support for this. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman, the 13th, Dr. Cadle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the gentleman who was just talking there about the tires, if these people cannot furnish transportation for those tires, you can apply for rights and get them if you prove that they cannot service your area or whatever. You can get your own authority. It's pretty easy to get, really. You have to publish it in a newspaper. But let me be clear on something else. If I'm a trucking company, I can load a semi-trailer full of tires and I can haul it because it's my own product. I can haul it to the landfill. And there's really no authority on that because it's my own product. So, and that's what a lot of trucking companies do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 27th, Dr. Schott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the gentleman's amendment. We have a terrible problem in the southern part of the state. Our county commission has been working diligently for the past few years on litter cleanup. Just recently, they discovered what we call a holler down that way that's almost a mile long that's filled with tires that people have dumped off there, and there's no one to remove those. So we need this bill to basically open up the ability for those who don't have the protection of the monopoly that's given by the PSC to clear out this. It's not just a site problem, it's a health problem as well. These tires are infested with rats and snakes and all sorts of vermin. And it's a serious problem down our way, and it's evolving into a serious health problem. I urge that the bill be passed, that the amendment be defeated.
The gentleman at 66, Douglas Espinoza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman from the 40th yield for a question?
Gentleman does yield.
Just to be clear, you're a sponsor of the underlying bill, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So before us now is the gentleman's amendment. Could you help us understand, what do you believe the effect or the impact of this amendment would be if it were to pass? What effect would that have on your legislation and what you're trying to accomplish?
Thank you, sir. I believe this amendment would basically return us to a monopoly on this business, keeping our area, the 40th District, from having people get involved in cleaning up and removing these tires. Earlier in my efforts to explain the bill and why it was introduced, I overlooked the rejection of the amendment, and that's what I hope to do, is to oppose the amendment to this bill. Thank you.
So you believe that this amendment, if adopted, would basically defeat or diminish the positive impacts of your bill? Is that what I'm understanding you to say?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Speaker.
The gentleman at 16th, Douglas Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chair of the Committee on Government Organization yield?
Chairman does yield.
Thank you, sir. On the underlying question here, what is the reason for which there are only 8 licensed folks to be able to, haulers to get these tires out of our haulers?
Typically, it's to protect people that are already in the business within the state. The problem with it is they have no jurisdiction, those out of state. If we live in a border area like I do, we don't really have this problem because these out-of-state haulers will come in and take the tires away. When you get into the center of the state, you've only got a limited number of people that will haul the tires. That's why you see them thrown out along the streams, because people can't get rid of them.
Okay, so would I then be accurate in saying that currently there is a setup that we have on a regulatory structure which encourages out-of-state businesses to do work in our state, to the detriment not only of businesses that would be in the panhandles or in border counties, but most specifically to the folks in the center of the state where, for whatever reason, the economics don't have someone from out of state coming to haul the tires out of our haulers? Would that be accurate?
That would be accurate.
Thank you, sir. Speak to the amendment.
Gentleman, may proceed.
This appears to be an artificial barrier to entry to a business, and therefore I would urge rejection of the amendment. Thank you.
The gentleman at 29th, Douglas Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just like just about everybody else that spoke this morning, I think what we have in front of us is a very good bill that seeks to remove some barriers to a business that it appears is very needed. I know in my area, we have some of the same issues that the gentleman from the 27th mentioned in terms of some of these tires being thrown out and things like that, you don't have a whole lot of help from some businesses that can clean this thing up. And if we're supposed to be promoting some of these ideals about reducing the size of government and reducing the impact on businesses that are trying to make a living and perform a needed function in our society, I think we'd have to reject this amendment and move on with the underlying bill. So I'd ask everybody to vote against this amendment. Thank you.
The gentleman, the 14th, Douglas Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the amendment's sponsor yield to a question, please?
Sponsor does yield.
Thank you. This was not in a committee that I was in, so what I'm looking at the bill here, it says exempting businesses relating to transporting scrap tires, but it references a code, and without me looking up the code, is this exempting them from some PSC registration or something like that? Is that what it is?
I believe so. You might have to ask the chairman of government organization of that. But I can tell you that on section 16 of this part, this still would allow section 16 of this still allows the Department of Environmental Protection to authorize people to remove those tires. So, of course, we're hearing in here about how these tires will not, these haulers are full of these used tires, well, the Department of Environmental Protection would still be allowed to haul those out of there with a contract with somebody. So this wouldn't be just, only these folks can have it. So I think that section of the bill is very important.
Okay, thank you. Would the chairman of government organization please yield? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to figure out what we're exempting. What is it that we're exempting here exactly?
Well, whether the gentleman's amendment passes or not, the DEP still has the authority to remove tires and make sure that people clean up. So that's not in question. What the gentleman's amendment would do would remove the ability for more West Virginians to get into the business of hauling tires out, cleaning up our state.
Okay, the question though is what are we exempting? I'm trying to figure out how difficult it would be for a local company to actually comply to.
Under current regulations, the PSC issues, I think they call them medallions, to companies to haul tires. They've only issued 8. And my understanding is from testimony, there's only 2 that are actually active. What exempting would exempt this section of code, which would allow trucking companies, without going through the PSC, to start hauling tires out to clean up our hollows and areas in the center of the state.
Okay, so if I'm a trucking company and with the gentleman's amendment passing, if it passes, what do I have to do to get registered to haul these tires?
You would have to apply to the Public Service Commission to get a medallion to allow you to haul tires.
Okay, so I'm sorry to keep going, but what is the process for me applying to the PSC? I mean, is it something I have to post $1 million bond or something, or what's involved in that?
Council advises me that they have different rules on how they do it, whether it be a taxi or hauling tires or whatever. They did not give us testimony as to the procedure, but from the gentleman from, I believe, the 40th said it's a rather convoluted process and hard to get. I'm assuming that's why there's only 8 in the state.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman of 13th, Cadle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for letting me speak again. But I'll clear this up. If you apply for authority in West Virginia, PUC rights, and if they cannot provide the service, you can prove that. You go down, apply for rights, and you got rights to haul tires. Now, you have to have, it used to be, I'm not sure, 500,000 insurance, maybe 750 now, I don't know. But these people who are going to haul tires will not be regulated, will not know if they have insurance or not. That's why things are regulated. And like I'm saying, if the guys can't provide service, all you got to do is get down and get authority and you can haul tires. And the reason we have tires laying in ditches and creeks and everywhere else is not because of transportation, it's because it costs to get rid of them. And people don't want to pay $3 a piece to get rid of the tar. So that's the real problem. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman of 56th, Douglas Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I rise in opposition to the gentleman's amendment. The trucking industry is regulated through the federal government, so it's not like any unregulated people are going to be picking up tires. DEP also regulates the disposal of tires, so it's not like that's going to be unregulated. What we're going to do here is, if we defeat the gentleman's amendment, you're going to open up the market, create competition, have more people hauling tires out so that we don't have tires thrown into our streams. The bill in its form without the amendment, the PSC actually supports, because they know there's a problem. The gentleman from the 44th, I believe, reconsidered. His county and district would be cleaned up because you can now get rid of the tires. There is somebody to haul them away. I again urge the defeat of the gentleman's amendment so that we can clean up our state, put people to work, and get some more business in here. Thank you.
The gentleman of 46th, Douglas Martin.
Do I have the right to close on this since we reconsidered it?
You do. Now's the time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I've heard a couple people talking about, the not being able to get this permit. There is a process in which you go through in order to get these permits to take these tires. You know, the chairman talked about all these tires back in the hollers of these back roads. Well, yeah, you know why those are in the back roads and why they're back there is because they're hiring somebody illegally to take those tires out of those tire shops. And what they're doing is they're charging them less than what somebody would charge to properly take them away and properly dispose of them. They were paying someone else to take them down a road to throw them over the hill because they're charging less. You know, the gentleman from the 13th said it perfectly. The companies do not want to pay that extra $1 or $2 in order to properly dispose of them. You know, another and very important piece of this legislation that I haven't heard very many people talk about is the DEP will now be allowed to hire contractors to haul these tires away. And they will not have to have this certification. And that is very important because, you know, when you talk about these back roads, you talk about, you know, somebody going around and throwing tires out. The DEP, once they assess the problem, they can then throw the tires in the back of a truck or hire whoever they want to go and properly dispose of them. But allowing the DEP to do that versus another business is that they will make sure that these tires are properly disposed of. So, Mr. Speaker, I urge passage of the amendment again.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment as explained by the gentleman from the 46th. Roll call has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Those in favor of the amendment as explained by the gentleman from the 46th will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result of this question. There are 46 ayes, 52 nays, 2 members absent, not voting, less than a majority in favor. Having voted in the affirmative, chair declares the amendment rejected. Bill will be advanced. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Subject to announcements, the House will stand in recess until 6:30 p.m.
The gentleman from the 28th, Doug Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republican members of the House will caucus here in the chamber. We will begin at 2 p.m.
The gentleman from the 16th, Doug Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure will meet in House Government Organization at 2:45 p.m. The agenda is posted.
The gentleman from the 13th. The gentleman from the 13th, Doug Cadle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources will meet tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Everybody listen, 9 o'clock instead of 8:30. Tomorrow morning in Gov Org, and the agenda will be posted. Thank you.
Chair will note for those announcing meetings for tomorrow, it is the chair's intention that we begin the floor session tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So plan accordingly. Lady from the 3rd, Doug Storch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to claim that your Committee on Political Subdivisions will meet tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m., subject to change.
Sure will be. The gentleman from the 16th, Doug Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The first subject to change is your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure, which will now meet at 3 p.m. The agenda is posted. Government Organization. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 41st, Doug Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Health and Human Resources plans to meet at 2 p.m. tomorrow in 215E, and Republicans will caucus at 1:30 in the chairman's office.
The gentleman from the 10th, Doug Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Energy hopes to meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. in the Judiciary Conference Room, and the agenda will be posted.
The gentleman from the 53rd, Doug Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Fire and EMS is going to try to meet tomorrow evening at 5 in the Government Organization Room.
The gentleman from the 9th, Doug Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the unanimous consent, can I introduce a volunteer doctor of the day?
Is there objection? Chair hears no objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, the doctor of the day comes to us from Huntington, West Virginia. Please welcome Dr. Courtney Wellman.
The gentleman from the 35th, Doug Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on the Judiciary will meet today at 3:45 to continue the posted agenda in the committee room.
Thanks.
The gentleman from the 21st, Doug Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet today at 4:15 in the Education Committee room. The agenda is posted.
Lady from the 38th, Doug Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Pensions and Retirement plans to meet tomorrow at 4 p.m. in the House Finance Committee room, and the agenda will be posted.
Lady in the 32nd, Douglas Staggers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Democrats on Health and Human Resources will caucus in room 230 at 1:30. Thank you.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question before the House is a motion by the lady from the 49th that the House stand in recess until 6:30. Those in favor will say aye. Any opposed will say no. Ayes have it. House is in recess until 6:30.